In ancient Egypt, Hebrew slaves worked hard to set up a giant statue and other monuments. According to the song, they begged and called on their God to help them from slavery and yelled to their God to deliver them to the land he promised. One day, Hebrews were raided by soldiers in the Egyptian army, and they killed every newborn baby because Pharaoh was scared that one day there would be too many Hebrews and they would take over Egypt. A Hebrew woman named Yocheved tried to escape from the soldiers with 2 children and a baby. As she arrived at the river, she adrifted the baby in a basket, hoping this would help her son. While the basket was floating, Yocheved's daughter named Miriam followed to make sure that it was safe. But the basket encountered many dangerous situations, including crocodiles, hippos, and large boats that almost ended the baby's life. After a wild journey, the basket made its way to Pharaoh's palace and arrived in front of Queen Tuya, who was with her son, Ramesses. Queen Tuya was surprised to see a baby inside a basket, and Miriam was happy to see her brother safe with the queen, now hoping he would come back someday to deliver Hebrews from slavery when he grows up. The queen decided to adopt him as her son and named him Moses. Many years later, Ramesses and Moses competed in a chariot race. While racing, Moses asked Ramesses if he would love to see his face carved on a wall, to which he said someday. Immediately, Moses pushed his chariot into a wall, which almost killed him. As Ramesses saw that Moses wanted some fun, he sped up his chariot to interrupt Moses and take the lead. However, he lost control of his chariot and fell off the pitch, which made Moses take the lead once again. As the race went insane, they raced through the village and even raced through the temple construction, which made it collapse and led to the breaking of the dam of sand, spreading it into the entrance of the kingdom. Later, they both were blamed by Pharaoh, who sought to build an empire, and their only thought was to amuse themselves by tearing it down. Moses accepted this as his fault, that he was the one who led Ramesses to race in the temple construction, and he was responsible for all of that. Pharaoh reminded Ramesses of the task for which his birth had destined him, which was to uphold the ancient traditions. When he passes into the next world, Ramesses will be the morning and evening star. However, Ramesses argued with him, stating that one damaged temple does not destroy centuries of tradition. Nevertheless, he was yelled at by Pharaoh, who said that one weak link can break the chain of a mighty dynasty. Queen Tuya then calmed him down, and Pharaoh allowed him to go. As Ramesses left, Moses approached Pharaoh once again, claiming that it was his fault, and asked why he was so hard on him. He replied that Moses would never have to carry a burden like the crown he would pass to Ramesses, as Ramesses must not allow himself to be led astray. Moses helped Ramesses out by telling Pharaoh that what Ramesses cared about was his approval, and Moses knew Ramesses would live up to his expectations, which Ramesses only needed the opportunity for. Pharaoh let him go, and he would see both of them tonight at the banquet. However, Ramesses complained about his father's blame, that Pharaoh practically accused him of bringing down the dynasty. Ramesses wanted Moses' explanation about why he was always the one who ended up in trouble when Moses was the one who started something. Moses then figured it out and said it was because Ramesses cared too much. Ramesses responded by saying that Moses never cared at all. Yet Moses teased him, as Ramesses thought he cared more than Moses did, which Moses reminded him that they were now late for the banquet, for example. After Ramesses realized he was late for the banquet, he rushed to arrive on time, thinking his father would kill him. Moses assured him that nobody would notice them going in, but it didn't go as they thought, as everyone was already waiting for them to arrive. Queen Tuya whispers to Ramesses that he was just named Prince Regent, and he is now responsible for overseeing all the temples. She suggests he go to thank his father. At that moment, Moses proposes to Pharaoh that the high priests offer tribute to Ramesses, who is the new regent. Pharaoh accepts his proposal, and the priests decide to offer a beautiful woman named Zipporah, who is a Midianite slave girl. She is inspected by Ramesses, but she nearly bites his hand, and as he sees she is irritable, he offers her to Moses instead. She states that she won't be given to anyone, especially both of them, as she sees them as arrogant, pampered palace brats. Moses orders her to show respect to the Prince of Egypt, but she retorts that they will never get her respect as they don't deserve it. As she goes insane, Moses catches the rope to stop her movement, and as he sees the fountain behind her, he immediately releases the rope, which makes her fall into it. Queen Tuya seems disappointed in him, and Ramesses orders the guards to bring her to Moses' chambers. However, Ramesses appoints Moses to be the royal chief architect, as his first act being regent. Later that night, Moses attempts to apologize to Zipporah for what he did earlier, but he finds out she has fled from his room. He catches up to her as she escapes with a camel, but as Moses sees guards walking toward her, he immediately interrupts them and orders them to save a man who was tied up in his room. He then follows her all along until he encounters 2 Hebrews that Zipporah asks for water, and Moses now seems to be in love with her already. At that moment, the Hebrews who gave water to Zipporah turn out to be his sister Miriam and brother Aaron. Miriam is excited to see him in front of her door, and she tells Aaron that she knew Moses would return to them. She reveals to Moses that he is their brother. Moses is confused as Miriam tells him that he is not the prince of Egypt, and that he was born of their mother Jochebed. Moses thinks this is a joke, and states that Miriam goes too far, and she shall be punished. However, Aaron begs for his forgiveness, and pulls Miriam away, yet she lets him know about their mother set him adrift in a basket to save his life, to which Moses wonders that his mother saved his life from who, and Miriam mentions to let him ask the man who he calls father. As she continues telling him, he immediately stops her and states that she will regret this night. However, she starts to sing a song that Jochebed used to sing for Moses, which he suddenly realizes something and hurries back to the palace. While in his sleep, he dreams of the past where Pharaoh ordered his guards to terminate every Hebrew baby's life, which he sees his mother Jochebed with his sibling overcoming all obstacles to save his life and set him adrift on the river. At that time, he suddenly awakens from his nightmare and rushes to see the arts on the wall if it was real. Surprisingly, he finds out that indeed it is real that Pharaoh ordered his guards to kill those babies. Pharaoh approaches and tells him that the Hebrews grew too numerous, which he fears they might have risen against them. Moses wants his father to admit that he didn't do that. However, Pharaoh states that sometimes for the greater good sacrifices must be made, and Moses immediately terrifies as he hears that they were just slaves to his father. Later, he confronts his mother at the place where she first found him, and everything he thought he was is just a lie. But Queen Tuya comforts him, saying that no matter what happened, he is still their son. Ramesses now presents his plan. He is not going to restore the temple. Instead, he's going to make it more splendid than any other monument in Upper or Lower Egypt. While Moses is on his way to see Ramesses, he sees how the Hebrew slaves are suffering, but he can do nothing about it. As Ramesses tells him about his plan, he notices that one slave was being tortured by a guard. Moses immediately goes to save him, but unfortunately he accidentally pushes the guard off the scaffold and kills him. Panic-stricken and unable to believe what he had just done, Moses attempts to leave the kingdom. However, Ramesses tries to stop him and says he can take care of the situation, promising to make it as though it never happened. Moses argues with him, explaining that there is nothing Ramesses can do to change what he has done. Ramesses begs him to stay, but Moses has already made up his mind, and reveals to Ramesses that all he has known to be true is a lie, also telling him that he is not what Ramesses thinks he is. After hearing all of that, Ramesses doesn't know what Moses is talking about, and Moses lets him go to ask Pharaoh if he wants to know what it is. Moses wanders through the desert day and night without food and water. After several days, he stumbles upon a rock that breaks his sandal. Angry, he removes all of his royal ornaments but keeps the ring that Ramesses gave him. Not long after, a sandstorm overtakes him suddenly, but fortunately a camel comes across Moses holding a water pouch. Moses goes to get it, but he doesn't have any strength left, and he only manages to hang his arm around the pouch before passing out. The camel brings him to a fountain where he regains his strength. At that time, he encounters two bandits attempting to steal water from 3 children. As Moses gets an idea, he goes to release their camels for them to chase. However, due to his exhaustion, he falls into a well, revealing that this is where Zipporah lives. She goes to help him immediately, but after she notices that it is Moses, she drops him back into the well as revenge for when he made her fall into the fountain at the palace. Zipporah's sister mentions that this is why she will never get married. Moses then gets cleaned up by old ladies, and at once Zipporah's father Jethro, the high priest of Midian, comes in to welcome him warmly and invites him to dinner as their honored guest. As the night comes, Moses attempts to eat an apple, but is stopped by Zipporah's sister, as he is not supposed to eat yet. At that time, Jethro introduces Moses to everyone as a brave young man, whom they honor tonight. But Moses asks Jethro not to honor him, as he has done nothing in his life. Jethro denies him, as Moses has saved Zipporah from Egypt and defended his young daughter from the bandits, telling Moses that he seems not to know what worthy of honor is. After several days have passed, Moses has become a member of Jethro's tribe. He helps them build a shelter and becomes a shepherd with Zipporah. Also, his relationship with her is growing day by day. Zipporah then teaches him how to dance, and one day they decide to marry each other. Many years later, on a beautiful day, Moses wakes up and looks after the sheep as usual. However, when he sees one of his sheep escape, he follows it to a cave and encounters a bush that burned in a way he had never seen before. He puts his staff into it to see if it burns, but to his shock, it doesn't do any damage to the staff or even his hand. Immediately, he hears a voice whispering his name and ordering him to take his sandal off from his feet, as the place he stands is holy ground. After realizing it is the God of his ancestors, he takes off his sandal right away. Moses wonders what God wants from him, and as his ancestors have seen the oppression of his people in Egypt and have heard their cry, he decides to come down to deliver them out of slavery, and he chose Moses to be the one who leads the Hebrew people to deliver Hebrew slaves from Pharaoh. However, Moses denies him, thinking the people will never listen to him because he was the prince of Egypt, the son of the man who slaughtered their children. The God yells at him to quit his cowardice and commands Moses to go to the king of Egypt, and he shall be with him. But if Pharaoh doesn't listen, then God will smite Egypt with all his wonders. The God presents him a staff, and with it Moses shall do his wonders. Afterward the God disappears, leaving the bush no longer alight, and Moses returns to his wife joyfully and tells her everything that he just experienced. As Moses asks Zipporah for her approval to save his people, she first hesitates as he only has himself, but he begs her, mentioning her family as they are free and have a future ahead of them. He wants the same for his people, and he has to do the task that God has given him. Eventually, she agrees to come with him. After a few days of wandering through the desert, they finally arrive at the kingdom where Hebrew slaves are exhausted, thirsty, and desperate in their lives. They make it into the palace where Ramesses is now a pharaoh. However, Ramesses is shocked to see Moses still alive, and they are happy to see each other once again. Yet Ramesses' priests remind Moses of his crime, but Ramesses pardons his crime forever of which he stands accused, and it will be known that Moses is the prince of Egypt. Moses says in his heart that Ramesses is his brother, yet he explains that things cannot be as they were. Ramesses sees no reason why not, but Moses states that Ramesses knows he is a Hebrew. He requests Ramesses to let his people go free, as the God of Hebrew came to him to deliver them out of slavery. Moses shows the power of God by turning his staff into a snake. However, Ramesses is impressed by this and decides to play along, ordering his priests to show what their God could also do. The priests then perform magic and call out their Egyptian gods' names, summoning 2 snakes to show how powerful their God is. After the show ends, Ramesses wonders what this is really about, and Moses lets him look at the slaves to see what he sees. In Ramesses' eyes, he only sees a greater Egypt than his father, but on the contrary, Moses doesn't see it that way. Yet Ramesses cannot change what he sees, as he has to maintain the ancient traditions. He bears the weight of his father's crown. Moses can't believe that Ramesses doesn't understand what his father was. His hands bore the blood of thousands of children, and now he can't hide in the desert while his people suffer at Ramesses' hand. Ramesses then realizes that he came here just to free his people, and Moses returns the ring back to Ramesses. However, Ramesses has already made up his mind that he will not let his people go, and he also doubles the workload of the slaves. As Moses passes by the slaves, they throw mud in his face, causing him to fall. Aaron, his brother, questions him on how he feels when he gets struck to the ground, but Moses explains to Aaron that he didn't mean to cause him more pain, as he was just trying to do what God told him. Aaron says there is no God who cares for them, and wonders when Moses started to care about the slaves. Aaron assumes that it was when Moses found out that he is one of them. Moses agrees and states that he didn't care because he didn't wish to care. However, Miriam shows up to defend Moses from Aaron, and he apologizes to her for being wrong. She encourages him, saying she has been a slave all her life, and God has never answered her prayers until now. But for Moses, God saved him from the river and all his wandering, and even now God saved him from the wrath of Pharaoh. She begs him not to abandon them as well, just like God did for him. Hearing all of that, Moses goes to confront Ramesses once again to let him free his people. As Ramesses becomes tired of him, he orders his guards to capture Moses. At that moment, God's voice whispers to Moses' ear to use the staff, and he immediately puts the staff into the river, which turns it into blood. Ramesses also orders his priests to show him that their God can do what Moses' God can do, and they suddenly turn the water into blood as well. Ramesses lets Moses abandon this useless mission, as he has indulged Moses long enough and considers it over. However, Moses lets him know that this is just the beginning. Aaron complains about the priests who just did the same thing, and Pharaoh still has power over their lives. Moses encourages them that Pharaoh can take everything away from them except their faith, and motivates them to believe. As soon as they will see God's wonders, they will be free. Since Pharaoh refused to free Moses' people, swarms of frogs come out of the river to raid their palace. The meals they eat, cover with bugs and animals from everywhere around the kingdom, started to take over their lives. Their kingdom is now full of fire raining down. Soon after, their guards, priests, and even Pharaoh are infected. As the chaos ends, Moses approaches Ramesses, who thinks he shows up to him just to ask him to let his people go. Moses begs him that they must bring this to an end, yet Ramesses doesn't respond to him. Moses brings up their memory together when there was a time Ramesses switched the heads of the god of the temple of Ra. Ramesses replies that Moses was there switching heads right along with him as they put the hippo on the crocodile and crocodile on the falcon, which made the priests thought it was a horrible omen and fasted for 2 months. Ramesses' father was furious, but Moses was always there for him to get him out of trouble. At that moment, Ramesses' son appears to find his father and wonders if Moses is the man who brings chaos to his kingdom. Ramesses also wonders why Moses did this. It is because no kingdom should be made on the back of slaves. Moses lets him know that his stubbornness is bringing this misery upon Egypt, and it would cease if only Ramesses let the Hebrews go. However, Ramesses rejects him again and again, and Moses declares that something much worse than anything before is coming. Moses requests that Ramesses let go of his contempt for life before it destroys everything he holds, but Ramesses considers everything that Moses says to be useless. Later that night, God speaks to Moses again and commands him to take a lamb and mark the lintel and posts of every door with its blood. For tonight God will pass through the land of Egypt and smite all the firstborn. When God sees the blood upon the Hebrews' door, he will pass over them, and the plague shall not enter. Soon after, Ramesses' son is killed by the plague, which upsets him so much that he allows Moses and his people to go free. Moses led thousands of Hebrew people out of the kingdom and headed to Mount Sinai. But as soon as they arrived at the Red Sea, Ramesses led thousands of Egyptian army to kill the Hebrews, but they were interrupted by the God who blocked their way with fire. However, Moses decided to use the staff to split the sea in half for everyone to walk through it. After the fire faded away, the army rushed to catch up to the Hebrews, but then the sea pushed them back and the Hebrews made it to the shore. Everyone was happy that they were finally free and sought to build a future ahead of them. Moses began to celebrate with his family, but then turned back to look across the sea, thinking of his brother and saying goodbye one last time, as he knew they would never see each other again. As the Hebrews continued on their way, Zipporah told Moses to look at his people, that they were now free, and that Moses had completed God's impossible task for him. In the end, Moses was holding 2 stone tablets containing 10 commandments that God had given them to live by, and watched his people enjoy their new life from the top of Mount Sinai. This is the end of the movie, and I hope you enjoyed my recap. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe so you won't miss out on my new content.